Thanks everyone for coming, and thanks very much to Emmeline and Objectifs for bringing us here. There's 3 VII photographers in town this week. We're teaching 3 workshops. Ed is teaching one right now, I'll teach one on Tuesday, and Jessica Demuck, primarily a filmmaker, is coming in to teach later half of next week. And I don't think Ed needs too much introduction. He is a very prolific photojournalist, documentary photographer. He's been working at it for almost 40 years. And just this morning, he was saying in his class that, he still feels like a little kid, although he's been at it for 40 years. He's still very excited about making pictures and about working on his images. Ed is someone I've known for some years. He is, I think, among the most versatile documentarians that I know. He spends half his time now making films. And he is widely known in the industry as a very nice guy. I know he hates that. But it's true that in this industry, then there are some not so nice people. So it's always a relief that, Ed is one of the most balanced people. He has normal family life. And that's a lot more that we can say than for a lot of us. I'll just read this quote that he begins his one-page CV with, because I think it's a very good summation of what he is about. Ed says, "I take on issues that stir my passions about the state of humanity and our world, and I deeply believe in the power of still images to change people's minds. I'm driven by this fact. The work of photojournalists and documentary photographers can have a positive impact on the world. The access people give to their lives is precious, as well as imperative for this important work to be done. Their openness brings with it a tremendous sense of responsibility to tell the truth, but to also honor their stories." So with that, I'll hand it over to Ed.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much, Gian and Emmeline, for having me. Excuse me, and thank you all for coming. So this is my first time to Singapore, and for those of you who have traveled from the East Coast of the United States here, you understand that I'm having an out-of-body experience right now due to jet lag. So anyway, so what I want to do this evening is I'm going to share a series of projects and bodies of work that reflect not only where I am today, but where I've come from. My arc as a photographer and as a photojournalist in some ways mimics the last 20 or so years of how the media has changed, where I began in the early 1980s as a print-based photographer, with the goals of, which are still very honorable goals of making books and exhibitions and having my work printed in magazines, and of course, honoring the importance of text and the words that go with my pictures so that I can tell a proper story. Well, now more than half of what I do is film, is video, and I would say the majority of what I create goes directly to some kind of a digital platform. So I'm sure I'm not telling you guys anything you don't already know, but as someone who is in the trenches, and has been in the trenches for 3 decades or more now, it's kind of amazing how things have changed. And I choose to look at it in a positive light, but there's no question that this disruption has also created, significant challenges and problems for us. And I sort of look at the new generation, younger folks who are getting started, and think, good luck. It's never been easy, but it's really tough now. And so I want to start with a very personal project. Thank you. As a photojournalist, I have spent more than half of my life away from my family. I have 2 kids, and for about 20 years, even before we were married, I would keep journals to my wife, Julie Winoker, and it was a way for me to stay connected. It's always been very important to me that I I yearn for connection. I think that's also why I do the work I do, because I want to connect with people. I want to be engaged. And so it's especially hard to be away from the people I love. And so I used to keep this journal, pre-digital. I would, arrive in a new place and find some beautiful little book or little, like a diary, and I would write in it every night and then, give it to my wife when I returned. Of course, once we went digital, then it became a nightly neurotic email. And then I'd be upset when she didn't respond to me a day later. Whereas when we were in the analog world, there were times where it would be 2 or 3 months before I would deliver whatever I had written. So I find that very interesting in terms of how our world has changed, how our very personal communication has been impacted by the digital revolution. So on the one hand, it's amazing that I can be, in the middle of Nigeria and keep track via text of my son's baseball games in Washington, D.C. But on the other hand, there's certainly things we're losing. I think maybe a certain patience, a certain ability, patience, and this idea of not getting instant gratification. So anyway, a few years ago, I decided to go through these journal entries and put them into book form. And the idea was to match images that I might have made that either the journal entries allude to directly or that were made around the same place, the same time that I made the pictures. And, they range from very personal things to, but I thought the real value was the fact that because of what I do, I get to witness a lot of things, quite intimately because of how I work as well. And so I was intrigued to sort of distill the political observations, the emotional reactions to things that I was seeing, and see if that would somehow work in this format. And then typically, with like this entry in particular is very emotional. This is in Lahore, Pakistan, and I had just finished a 10-week assignment there, and I was at my fixer's house. This is the gentleman who sort of is my interpreter and guide. He's actually a senior Pakistani journalist, and we're just about to sit down to make this meal that his wife has made, and he has 2 young kids, and his BlackBerry just explodes, not literally. And he sees there's been a suicide bombing across town. 55 people have been killed. It was a Taliban bombing of a children's shoe market. And so I looked at him, and my bags were packed, and I said, we've got to go. I pulled out my cameras. We went across town, witnessed this really horrible scene, and then I'll never forget his son in a trembling voice saying to him, "Daddy, do you have to go?" And it's these kinds of things that are so powerful beyond whatever photographs I make. It's just there's such visceral, powerful experiences. And so 4 hours later, I was on the plane to Dubai. I smelled of the fire and all that, and I wrote that entry that appeared in the book. So typical of my work now, I tend to work cross-platform, and multimedia and short documentary filmmaking is now an essential part of how I tell my stories, how I communicate with what I see as an expanded audience from where I was when I was solely a print-based photographer. So I'd like to share this film with you. It's, for me, a bit of an experimental film. It's extremely personal, but it's sort of a different, when you work in cross media, it's, each media requires or presents a different set of creative challenges. So let me share this with you, and then we'll carry on. So for the book, I asked my wife, who is, her career also sort of mimics mine in terms of representing how things in the media have changed, because she started as a writer and now she's a filmmaker, but I asked her to write sort of an addendum, I guess that's what you'd call, to the book, and it's amazing what she wrote, because essentially she completely called me out. You know, I think as if I were a woman, I would read it and I would go, yes. You know, like basically she was saying, Ed thinks he was doing this for me, but he was really doing it for himself. And and then you know, went on to essentially say how sorry she felt for me because of how much I have missed of our kids' lives and all that. But then in the end, that she recognizes that this is who I am, this is what I must do, and if she tried to change me, then I wouldn't be the same person. And so anyway, I was, you know, also very proud of what she wrote in terms of the strength and the candid nature. So for me, you know, it all begins with the story. It all begins with issues. You know, my work has always been predicated on looking at issues that I care about. You know, I truly believe that the greatest work in anything in life, really, the greatest things you'll do are the things you care about most deeply. Now, granted, most people don't have jobs that necessarily they're so passionate about, but this is definitely one of these professions where I think that's the only way you can survive. So these are pictures from a story I did a few years ago on Arab Christians in the Middle East. I was intrigued by, you know, I've worked in the Middle East, I've worked in the Muslim world for almost 30 years now. It wasn't by design, it's just sort of worked out that way. And, you know, I've watched the arc of certain stories and issues, and I started to see this pattern or this phenomenon of of Christians in the Middle East, in the very place where this religion was born. Their numbers are dwindling for various reasons and various different pressures. So I pitched it to the National Geographic, and thankfully they said yes. And so I went to Palestine and Israel and Syria and Lebanon to produce this story. And you know, for me, this kind of work, this is a very broad kind of a story. You know, there's probably 100 photo essays I could have done within this project, but I felt this is the kind of story that is important to raise and to raise awareness about. This is an Iraqi Christian who's now living in Beirut with his 10 kids, and Iraq has lost 90% of its Christian population. It's really quite profound what's happened since the American invasion in 2003. I was in the old city of Damascus, in the Christian quarter. Some of these places I would not be able to go to now, and I think I've made this in 2008, 2009. This is in Syria. These are Christian Arab scouts, you know, looking for ways, trying to show ways that they're holding on to their culture and maintaining the kind of discipline in their community. This is in one of the 2 remaining Christian villages in the West Bank in Palestine. This is a story in Nigeria. I've done a lot of work in Nigeria. This is in northern Nigeria. And again, I wanted to look at the issue of sort of the impact of Boko Haram and the conflict between Christian and Muslim population in Nigeria. Nigeria is an incredibly important country to not only the African continent, but the world. These are survivors of a church bombing in Kaduna. These are Muslim women who are getting tested for HIV to take part in a mass wedding. You know, the things that I get to see and are extraordinary. And, you know, I do, as the quote that Sheehan read at the beginning, you know, I sincerely believe that I am imbued with a tremendous sense of responsibility in the work I do. You know, in some ways I see myself as an ambassador, and in some ways you know, especially the way that the world is moving. It's I've realized this in the last year or so, that my youthful idealism that I began this, you know, my career with, has really faded into a kind of, you know, sort of a concerned place where I'm really concerned about the state of humanity and our civilization. And, you know, I do this work with the intention of bridging the gaps of understanding between peoples. And what I see is that the work I do, it is so hard to achieve that. and it's never been harder. But I carry on, and I keep on moving forward because I've found other ways, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. Advocacy work is one way to get around that. This is the Emir's palace, the Emir of Kano, and he's greeting a Saudi delegation. So this man would be traditionally viewed as the sort of, the most important authority and figure within the society there, and he is viewed as moderate by Boko Haram. They tried to kill him 3 times. This is a Sharia courtroom. It took me 5 weeks to get access to this scene. In trying to tell these stories, again, especially working with National Geographic, you tend to work more, you're looking at big issues and you're trying to make a single image to reflect those issues. So it's a very different way of working than going very deep and focusing, which most of my work is about. Nigeria is rich in minerals. This is an artisanal gold mine, and this is in Zamfara province near Niger. But the problem is that most of the people here are working directly with lead and mercury. So this province has the highest incidence of lead poisoning in the world. And I truly believe that the lack of infrastructure, the lack of investment. Nigeria is one of the 10th largest exporters of gas and oil in the world. It should be a rich country, but so much of the wealth has been squandered through corruption and mismanagement, and so you have an infrastructure that is failing the people, and I think that is one of the many dynamics that feed into the insurgency. When you, especially, all the men in the world who have no hope and no proper training, they just turn to bad things. So in October, I went to Ghana as a part of a group project for VII Photo. We're looking at the impact of the Millennium Villages Fund. This is something that was started by the economist Jeffrey Sachs at Columbia University in New York a little over 10 years ago. And his idea was if he could raise millions of dollars and then pinpoint that aid to a handful of very poor, underdeveloped areas in Africa, and then sort of see the impact of that. So this project is looking at sort of 10 years on. I went to Ghana. We went to Rwanda, Ethiopia, Senegal, as well as Ghana. There'll be a book coming out this year of the work, and we all produced short films as well. So one of the things that I was looking at is women's empowerment, and the impact of it. As you can imagine, it's a very, very positive impact for women to have their own businesses. She has a hair salon. She makes honey. And this is an example of advocacy work. She has her own little mini mart in a container. When women have their own bank accounts, when they have control of their destiny, it is incredibly powerful, the impact it has, not only on their lives and the lives of their families, but the lives of the overall community. And this project has brought clean water to the community. A lot of these things just didn't exist prior to the investment of the Millennium Villages Fund. And it's interesting, and we might get into this when we talk, but this idea of advocacy work often raises sort of ethical issues of, as a journalist, what does it mean? What are the ethical implications of working as an advocate? And for me, at this point, I don't care. What I care about is making work that contributes in some way. I don't really care about objectivity. There are certain things in the world that I feel need to be shown and need to be, amplified. And at the same time, I feel that there's this term restorative journalism, and it's an interesting term, and I've unwittingly been doing this for a number of years now, and because I really do feel that if the media, and especially photojournalism, because there's something about being able to look at the worst things in the world and get as close as possible and make the most dramatic pictures of it, and that's somehow how you earn your your badge, your notch on your buckle, for being like whatever, the toughest person or having the most edgy pictures and all that. Well, you know what? I think we're losing our audience because there's only so much that human beings can absorb of misery and pain and violence and suffering. And I'm not saying we shouldn't see those things, obviously, but I feel that a much more effective form of journalism or reportage is where you shine a spotlight on a problem. Don't pull any punches. Absolutely show it, in an unflinching way. But then you're able to show a solution or that there is someone or something. I don't care if it's a government, I don't care if it's a corporation, an individual, an NGO, a foundation, whomever, whatever entity, there is an effort to fix it. And what that does is it not only raises awareness about a problem, but it inspires people that there is not only hope, because I know hope sometimes is a shallow word, although I think it is an important quality to have in life. It can inspire people to get involved, to be engaged. And so a project like this is, for me, emblematic of that. So, for instance, there's a lot of these wild gold mines, a lot of which have actually been started by Chinese companies. A lot of them are illegal. On the one hand, yes, it offers jobs for the local people, but it's tearing up a lot of the arable land. So it's a mixed bag. There's good things that have happened, like education. 10 years ago in this village, there was no school. It's obvious the importance of having education. Women's maternal health, huge issue. This clinic didn't exist 10 years ago. Women and babies were routinely dying in childbirth. Well, now every month, the pregnant women come in for sonograms. There are doctors and nurses who are monitoring their health. No one is dying now in childbirth in this village. So these are dramatic changes that, again, as a storyteller, it's exciting to be able to tell these kinds of stories. Actually got to witness a birth. She made it look very easy. I have witnessed other births, including both of my kids, and this was thankfully there was no drama in this. Okay. So as I said, increasingly I'm doing a lot of work with film and video and multimedia. And in 2014, I started to see all these stories about the drought in California. I lived in the Bay Area for 25 years, so I have a close connection to California. And I decided to do a project. I pitched an idea to the New Yorker magazine to do a photo essay about the drought. And they agreed. And for months, because I was very busy, I couldn't quite get to it. I was doing all this research. And then one day, this is an Instagram story, one day I was looking at my Instagram feed. You guys all know what Instagram is, right? All right, come on, be honest. Who's not on Instagram? Raise your hands. You people are strong. You're not a lemming. No. Anyway, and so I was looking at my Instagram feed, and I see this beautiful black and white photograph from the Central Valley of California about the drought, and I see it's done by this photographer, Matt Black. He's a California-based photographer. I don't know if any of you have heard of him. He recently he recently got into Magnum as a nominee. This guy assisted me in the 1990s when I lived in San Francisco. I was like, oh my God, Matt Black, he's an amazing photographer. He lives in this area. Why should I reinvent the wheel? I have a week of field work, right? This man has been photographing this issue for 15 years. So I called him up and I said, hey Matt, why don't we work together on this? And and I thought, why don't we do this? We'll use your photographs, I'll shoot video instead of stills, and we'll come together to create this project, make a short film for the New Yorker. So I called then the photo editor at the New Yorker, and I didn't even finish the sentence describing my new plan, and she said yes. So I'd like to share the results of that. So the still photographs are not mine, they're Matt's, and the video is mine. So for me, working in film and multimedia has become such a powerful tool of communication, and it's I find myself saying this quite often. You know, I couldn't have imagined 30 or so years ago when I began all that I'm doing now, and the tools that I have, and the channels of dissemination that we have. So I mentioned advocacy work. This next body of work is my current project that I've been working on for over 3 years now, and this to me embodies sort of the greatest elements of advocacy journalism. So this is a project about the epidemic of kidney disease among sugarcane workers in Central America. And I've been working mostly in Nicaragua, but I've now expanded to El Salvador. I was actually just in India in January, expanding the project to there as well. So in the last 20 years, more than 20,000 sugarcane workers, mostly men, have died or gotten sick from this disease. And it's not caused by the typical, by obesity, diabetes, or high blood pressure. And so my approach to doing this project was sort of threefold. One was doing portraiture, again, in thinking of sort of visual strategies of how to create the most effective stories. I decided to do a series of portraits of workers. Now increasingly women are going to the fields because there's not enough men to work in the fields. This is a father and son. They're both sick with the disease. What's happening now is, whereas the father, who's in his mid-50s, he might have worked for 20 years before he got sick. His son worked maybe 3 years and now has contracted this disease. The coffin maker in town is extremely busy. He's a former sugarcane worker. So one approach was to do a body of work of portraits. And then the other was to do reportage and documentary photography, to sort of show the conditions and the different scenes that they're, of them working. This gentleman I think he was 37 years old. He died 2 days after I made this picture. This is his 15-year-old son massaging his feet. So for me, this is about human rights. I mean, it is unacceptable to me that people who bring a product that we all consume sugar in one way or another, would be allowed to be getting sick. I mean, literally every day there's a funeral for a sugarcane worker in this one town, Chichigalpa, in Nicaragua. This is a 29-year-old worker who had died, and they're preparing his body for his wake. This is almost like a daily ritual in this community. It's a one-company town, the sugarcane mill, and what's going to happen is, because now I've begun working on a feature documentary film, and over the next 2 years I plan to probably still continue with my stills, but really move into a full-length doc project. And what we're seeing now is that the sugarcane companies are going to mechanization, which is a positive thing in that workers won't be getting sick, but now it's like a double whammy. So now they're decimated by this disease, and then they're going to lose their jobs. Because when you mechanize, it's basically like 100 to 1. You need one worker where you needed 100 workers. So they could be facing yet another dilemma of no work. And after seeing so much of this over the last few years, where in this one town, 67% of the men are sick or have died. That's pretty crazy. What is the impact on the young women, on the girls, when the male figures in their community are mostly sick and dying? What does that do to their psyches, their sense of well-being and security? So this work has been part of an initiative with a Dutch NGO, Solidaridad, and an American NGO, the La Isla Foundation. And they've implemented a pilot project in El Salvador, a 3-year project, which is called the WE program. And it's basically introducing rest, water, and shade to the workers in the fields. And after the first year, the impact has been quite positive. The levels of creatinine, the marker of whether you have this disease, have either stabilized or gone down just by simply providing water, tents in the field, so that every hour, because they're working in, it'd be like working in these conditions here, maybe even hotter than here. humid, and then you know, shade and rest. So, but the other beautiful thing is their productivity has increased by 40%. So it's a win-win. You know, and the media work that I have done and other colleagues that have worked with these organizations or that have worked on this story, the attention that it has garnered for the issue has had a significant impact on the work practices of these companies and on the implementation, you know, the realization of this pilot project. So this is a case where the media work is connected to real change. And that's a very exciting and very positive thing from my perspective. So the third element in my approach to this is making, you know, we made a short documentary film, a 15-minute film that appeared on Nat Geo digital platform last year, and that was a real game changer. When this film appeared on Nat Geo's site, the companies really sort of realized they couldn't just continue to sort of sweep this under the rug. I'm going to just play the 5-minute clip from this. You can see the full films either on my site, edkashi.com, or VII Photo, or talkingeyesmedia.org. So, okay. So, we move to social media, Instagram. This has become a big part of my work and my practice now. Again, yet another element of what I do that I never, you know, who would have imagined 20, 30 years ago that any of us would be doing this stuff. But it's become a really exciting and powerful element of my life, certainly in my work. And again, because I am so obsessed with making change and somehow contributing in a positive way, one of the feeds that I contribute to is Everyday Climate Change. And this is a feed that was started by James Delano Whitlow. He's an American based in Tokyo, actually. And it's just a little over a year old, and we've gotten a lot of followers. And the idea behind this feed is, well, what's really important is that the captions have to be quite rigorous and really have to be fact-checked, certainly because there's so many people who, at least in the United States, who deny climate change. I'm not sure about the rest of the world. We are going backwards in America, yes. So, you know, this is in Madagascar, where 90% of the forests have been cut down. You know, that there are very real, very factual things taking place on the earth right now. It's undeniable. And if there's some way to draw attention to it, to educate people, especially to get young people engaged in this, I think that's a huge, you know, very important effort to be made. In December, I took my first vacation in 20 years. I know, that's pathetic. And went to Costa Rica, and of course, I still had to work. So, this is where we were staying. You can imagine I was very uncomfortable. It was so beautiful. But I was, you know, I have an unquenchable thirst for knowledge, and I'm still curious like a annoying little kid. And so I learned that Costa Rica is virtually 100% renewable energy. Now, granted, it's a small country, but that's amazing. I didn't know that. So I thought, well, here's a positive kind of post you could make for everyday climate change instead of all of the horrible things that are going on and, you know, kind of the end of the earth scenarios. You know, here was a chance to point out a positive, you know, a positive story. I was just in India, as I said. I was on an overpass. We were filming, and this coal train came by, and I thought, actually, I didn't think about it. My colleague said, Ed, this will be great for everyday climate change. You know, again, it's not so much just the photograph, it's the caption that I wrote. The fact that India, even after the Paris climate talks, is talking about doubling, I think at least doubling, their coal production. Of course, China is also doing that. These countries need energy to develop. That's not the issue. It's the kinds of energies they use. And it's in Alaska, you know, with the melting ice cap. So for me, Instagram is, you know, it embodies so many different elements of what I care about, what I do, what I love doing with photography, you know, from the craftsmanship and the playfulness, the personal journaling, you know, occasionally that I'll do of my family or my life, and then of course the very serious work, photo essays and advocacy work that I produce along the way. And again, what's amazing about it is we are now publishers. You know, I am a publisher. I have whatever 230 some odd thousand followers. There is nothing in between me and them, which is quite empowering, and it's kind of amazing. So I want to share just one more short thing related to sort of mobile photography and this whole sort of social media phenomenon we're living through. In 2012, when Hurricane Sandy, Superstorm Sandy, hit the New York, New Jersey area, I was one of 5 photographers that was assigned by Time magazine to cover it. But the thing they said was, we want you to shoot it with your phone, and we want you to post it on Instagram. And so that was a total like paradigm shift, that a major publication would be paying me to go directly to digital, not to print. And so then a year later, for the 1-year anniversary, I came up with a thought of, wouldn't it be cool to go and re-photograph some of the places I had photographed the year before? It was over a 2-day period, and I got NBC.com to commission that. And then I put together this short little piece that I'd like to share with you. All right. So the final piece I'd like to share with you tonight is a multimedia film that we produced. Talking Eyes Media is a nonprofit production company that my wife and I started in 2002, and she runs it. And I'm fortunate that I have in my house a post-production house or company. So unfortunately, she's too busy. I often can't get her to work with me. But so I know it's terrible. This women's lib thing, you know, it's like, anyway, sorry. And so we're engaged in this awesome 3-year project called Newest Americans. And it was an idea that, and for me, this is an example of the power of, my photo agency, VII Photo, where I was able to leverage and parlay that to get funding for 3 years to partner with Rutgers University Newark, which is one of the most, that's in Newark, New Jersey, which is one of the most diverse campuses in the United States. Over 100 languages is spoken in this campus. And then VII Photo, and then Talking Eyes Media. And this is a storytelling project and it's all about immigration. And all the stories emanate from either faculty or students on this campus. And so one of the pieces that we did last year was about a Syrian-American composer, and I'd like to share that with you now. And then we can open up the floor for discussion.